The Paw Paw Problem. Dear Scary Stories NYC, some of my friends, family, and I have a theory that Paw Paw, Michigan was named after a Dogman incident. Not any particular or specific Dogman incident that we're aware of, but one presumed lost to history. Local tradition disagrees with us, as the conventional story is that the town was named after the Paw Paw River, and the Paw Paw River was in turn named after the paw paw trees and the paw paw fruit in those trees. I believe I read on a local official governmental website that the word paw paw was a native term, but this is untrue. It was a Spanish corruption of the word papaya, which is a fruit that the Europeans had encountered in South America before they got as far north as Michigan. So you might say that the paw paw was, at least in those days, sort of the North American version of the papaya fruit. But the natives didn't call it paw paw. They called it asamine or racemine, which is where the scientific name for it was derived. The reason that a small group of us think the name of the location has to have originated somehow from the Dogman is that we ourselves have seen the Dogman, either in Paw Paw or else in the general area around it. When we think of Paw Paw, we don't visualize fruit. We visualize the double-sized dog paws that some of us claim to have seen on that canine creature. I'm going to tell you 4 or 5 of our real-life sightings and experiences with both upright and quadrupedal canines of extraordinary size in the Paw Paw area, and then I'm going to let you decide for yourself what you think about it. So before we get back to my Dogman ideas, we should take a very brief side trip into explaining what a paw paw fruit even is. If you live in Indiana or Kentucky, you can probably tell this a lot better than I ever could. Feel free to correct me in the comments if I get anything wrong. Now, the paw paw was once a fairly common staple of the diets of people on the East Coast and in the Midwest before the arrival of Europeans, but now in 2022, it's a rare and exotic treat. The paw paw is a fruit and tree that foragers do go out and look for, but it isn't generally farmed, and it's going to be extremely rare to see them in a store. This is mainly because the fruits stay ripe for such a short period. They were once cultivated all over the eastern and central United States by the native peoples who would forage for fruits and vegetables when they were in season. This worked well for their culture, but the paw paw never translated into modern life in the U.S. For one thing, it takes 7 years before the tree even starts producing any fruit. Then the fruit itself is only edible for such a short period of time that it's hard to transport them or store them. Many people who get their hands on some ripe pawpaws will make homemade pawpaw ice cream or jams or jellies, of which there are a large number of recipes for on the internet. The fruit is also supposed to be quite delicious when eaten raw, but I have never had that privilege, so I can't tell you for sure. I'd bet you $1 that the Dogman in this region have all tasted the paw paw fruit, though. I bet they've tasted a lot of things that we never will. I wouldn't be surprised to find the fruit itself being named after the Dogman, since I believe that these canines are omnivores and scavengers, not merely carnivores. I think they eat some plants and roots in addition to roadkill and whatever prey they can manage to bring down. I bet the Dogman are in Michigan when the paw paw is ripening. Maybe they go to Canada or Wisconsin afterward, but I know they're here when the paw paw is in season. This first story is from my own father, who said this happened to him in 1964 in the autumn. This was when my mother was expecting me, actually, so Dad was taking on extra jobs and saving money to take care of me once I made my grand entrance. I think he was out working as a cab driver off the books when this happened. It was sort of like Uber, but probably not legal back then. It's also possible he was driving home from one of his gigs, though I don't really know. For whatever reason, Dad was driving on 41st Street along the edge of 3 Mile Lake, through a nice suburban neighborhood, on that outcropping of land over there. Suddenly, through the bushes that lead to the water, crashed a huge dog, walking upright, dripping wet. Dad said it was clearly a canine and not a bear, and that it turned to face him, fully lit up by the car's headlights. Dad said he slammed on the brakes, and the thing just sort of barked at him for a while. Dad compared the Dogman to his old sergeant in the army. He said it sounded like he was barking out orders to him, and the thing sounded pretty angry about something. Dad told me he just sort of sat there in the car waiting for the upright beast to get it all out of his system. Eventually, the beast man marched across 41st Street and straight into someone's backyard. Then, he just sort of kept walking in the direction of the other shoreline or beach area on the other side. The last couple of times Dad told the story to me or the family about what he'd experienced, he made a point of stressing that what he saw was not the same as many modern Dogman reports. He did not witness broad shoulders. He did not see hand-like clawed paws. This was a dog, a really big canine or wolf, and it walked upright on its hind legs. Its arms were not held back to the sides the way humans do. They either hung in front or they were raised up in front in a defensive posture, but the paws at the ends of the arms were dog paws. This was a sighting of an upright walking canine, but it was not the modern werewolf-style sighting that you usually run on this channel. The next sighting I'm going to tell you about took place in Sunset Park, and it did feature a werewolf like Dogman this time. This happened to my cousin we'll call Cousin Ernie. It was sometime in the late 70s through the early 80s, and I know this because Ernie was married in June of 1984, and he's still married today to that same woman. The young lady in this story, though, she was one of the girlfriends that Ernie dated before settling down. He wrote it all up in an email to me, so this next part is my cousin Ernie telling us his story in his own words. Take it away, Ernie. During the period before we got married, when my eventual wife dumped me, I dated some pretty wild women. I had fling after fling, and at the time, I thought I was incredibly happy. Of course, my loving wife has since explained to me that I was actually miserable and sad while I was having all that amazing fun. Luckily, she rescued me from those adventures and those satisfying days, and now we're married, locked together at the hip, until we are finally freed by clinical death. When this story took place, I was not so lucky. Back then, I was dating a wild girl who thought out of the box. She wore white out of season. She went in the outdoor. When she suggested we go to Sunset Park to watch the sun rise, I was excited to go. We were kind of noodling and canoodling by ourselves in the darkness there, waiting for the sun to change the colors of the sky. After the sun finally came up, it was hard not to notice how easy we were to see from the road. There are very few trees in that park, and we felt kind of exposed there. That was why we walked toward the wooded area across the street to the north. We were thinking of going inside those woods and sort of, getting romantic, as this was a new relationship, and we still couldn't get enough of each other, if you know what I mean. Even before we crossed the street, though, we could see that the underbrush in those woods was so thick, it would be impenetrable. In fact, I literally said something to that effect like, "There's no creature larger than a squirrel who could get through there." And just to show you how smart I am, this big, grizzly bear-sized ape man with a dog head came crunch, crunch, crunch right out of those woods. He stood on the grass on the corner over there and looked around until he spotted me and my girl. I remember him blinking a few times at us, and he really did look like some sort of magical wolfman. His eyes lit up like something from a horror movie, but that was otherwise basically a wolf head. Why the wolf head was on top of that hairy caveman-looking body? I really don't know. He looked like something out of a Joe Dante horror movie. In a number of ways, he really did seem like a movie werewolf, except that a guy in a costume with animatronics could never have run through that thick, jungly woods as fast as this guy did. Okay, so where was I? Oh, right. Staring at this werewolf from a horror movie, standing there on the corner naked. He was a big guy, but not like 8 feet or anything. Size-wise, he could have been a man in a costume, but the legs looked all wrong to me, and my girl as well. We both talked later about how the legs were not shaped like a human's legs. They seemed stronger than a human's legs, too. This creature seemed incredibly strong, in fact, and I didn't know what I was gonna do if he took a step in our direction. There was no way we could outrun him, and there was no way we could win a fight against him either. Fortunately for us both, the beast turned around and walked quickly back into those woods, leaping and sliding through those bushes like they almost weren't even there. Even as I saw him doing it, I couldn't understand what my eyes were seeing. It was not magic, but it was happening so fast it might as well have been magic. If this creature were compared to the finest human athlete, it would be like comparing that athlete to a toddler, relatively speaking. Humanity's only defense against something like this Dogman would be technology or weaponry, and I had neither of them on me at that moment. But the werewolf man just left us alone, and so I lived to tell this story that my wife hates to hear me tell. The end. Thanks, cousin. A former girlfriend of mine that I remained friends with once had a Dogman encounter on Maple Island. This was not an upright walking canine, nor was it a werewolf type either. This was a remarkably large dog that walked on all fours through most of the encounter. Here's an excerpt from the email that Jenny sent me about it, which she has given me permission to use. Quote, I went picnicking on Maple Island in Michigan, and I saw a Dogman. I'm writing to you because Maple Island is near Pawpaw, and I remember your crazy theory about the Dogman creating the Pawpaw tree, or whatever it is that you go on about. This was a Dogman just like in that old movie they showed on Monster Quest that turned out to be a hoax. But this was in real life. It wasn't a Super 8 film. I had just broken up with my husband, and so I was hanging with my family, but I found that I didn't feel very much as though I belonged at first. I left the others to their picnic, and I walked to the shore, noticing consciously all the seaweed-type plants growing in the water along the shoreline. It was a somewhat steep drop over there, too. Looked like you'd get tangled up in the weeds and strangle yourself by accident. The thought of that made my family seem suddenly more friendly, and so I retreated to go remember how to get along with them. Now, the reason I mention all that was because about 50 minutes or an hour later, we all heard a big kerplunk kind of a splash, and then we all saw something climbing out of the water over there, in the exact spot I had noticed the seaweed and water plants growing. Rather than getting caught up in the plant life, this large beast appeared to be walking resolutely ahead, pulling anything out by the roots that dared to try to slow his passage. When he got to the shoreline and shook himself dry, we could all see that he was a 4-legged dog, 5 foot high, at the shoulder. He was long-haired, like the Dogman in the Gable film hoax, except this creature was too large to have been a human, and this thing seemed to have real fur. It was not wearing a ghillie suit. By this point, we were all standing up around the picnic table, staring at this bear-sized dog down by the water. I know I was not exactly afraid yet, but I was alarmed. It looked like a dog, and quite often large dogs are very friendly to me. So I wasn't afraid of him because of his size, but I sure was hoping that he would either turn out to be friendly, or that he'd just go off on his own and ignore us. This bear dog, he chose a third path. He decided to start barking at us like a car alarm or something. He looked like this was his master's backyard, and my family were all burglars. When he yipped and yapped, he briefly stood up on his hind legs. This thing was so huge, it looked like he could block out our sun from all the way over there. We all gasped in awe when it stood up, and there was this moment when all time froze still. Then that big canine hit the ground running on all fours, making strides toward us before we could even grab our stuff and start running away. We got chased back to the parking area, where we could no longer see the beast behind us, nor feel the ground shake and rumble under his thundering steps. What kind of a wolf grows to be that tall? It was gray, but I can't really tell you very much else about the massive creature. I've got one more Dogman story for you with 2 sightings in it, and this happened to me personally. In fact, it happened when I was dating that smart girl, remember her? She didn't want to go to the zoo. She wanted to go to the Portman Nature Preserve. The fun started before we even officially arrived. As we were about to pull into the parking area of the main building of the Nature Preserve, we saw a bear-sized dog running upright, off the grounds, and across the street into a wooded area to our right. We were both like, huh? And then I made the left and finished pulling into the parking lot, only to discover no hubbub of any sort. Nobody was chasing the 2-legged dogman. Nothing seemed to be disturbed at all. We asked someone who worked there about the creature, and we got frowned at. We asked someone else, and got glared at, as though we told an unfunny joke. Shrugging our shoulders, we went wandering on the land. It's basically dirt paths through the middle of nowhere, and occasionally there are some wooden signs. The signs often repeat information you should have already known before you got there, so maybe the signs are for space aliens helicoptering in. At any rate, we were stopped at one of these, looking to make sure that we knew where we were, and where the closest porta potty was and so forth. Suddenly, crash! This big dude trips backward through some bushes and tree branches and lands butt first on the dirt path, down maybe 40 or 50 feet in the direction we were about to walk in. I'm looking, and I swear, it looked like he was wearing a skin-tight fur costume, like an all-over cat suit in a dark gray set of colors. Then this other really big guy whose furry cat suit was closer to black came flying out of those same woods, only this guy was facing in a direction where I could see his features. Except he didn't have a face in the sense that I had expected him to have. I mean, there was no humanity to it. It was a lot closer to looking like a dog than anything else, and yet neither of these men were canine looking to me. From the neck down, the 2 of them wrestled and growled and snapped at each other with their formidable fangs and claws, and soon I saw them standing off against each other in profile, and I realized their hind legs very much resembled dogs or wolves, as well as their heads. At least one of them had a tail. It's just that their torsos and arms were so humanoid. These couldn't have been men in costumes, though it would have been more likely that we were seeing dogs disguised as men. The shapes of the legs were entirely anatomically different from human legs, and these were living creatures. They were not costumed people. The lighter one scored a hit on his darker pursuer. That one in turn tripped backward to our right into some trees. Then, the gray one made a hasty escape into the woods to our left. The dark black dogman, standing 6'8" if he stood an inch, glared at us and roared, an almost feline-sounding warning. He burst into the woods to our left, after his apparent mortal enemy. My girl and I just sort of stood there for a while, and then I was like, "Do you want to keep going forward?" And she was like, "No, I'm good." And just like that, we were off to Arby's for some comfort food. So, do my family really think that Pawpaw was named after Dogman? Probably not. It's just sort of a way to try to draw people's attention to the fact that a bunch of us are convinced that we really saw this thing, or one of these things. In my case, I saw it too. So if we can't convince you that Pawpaw was named after the Dogman, maybe we should name our local Dogman here Pawpaw, after the town. I think that might solve the Pawpaw problem. We got a big donation from our EPCS. This is a lady who is truly blessed. We're gonna do another poem tomorrow for her. Now here comes Henry Lee as fast as a blur. Hank. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.